And what we'd like to be able to do now is ask you if you'd like to submit any sort of question or comment on what you've heard today. You can do that through the question tools. If you've been involved with us before, I think you might be familiar with how to use those. And we'll share that back with you, perhaps discuss between Greg and Frank and I a little bit about your question or comment. If there isn't a lot of questions coming in, we have just a few more polls that we think might be useful to share with you, just so that we can get a sense of what your experience has been. And if you'd like, we can even talk about those, and we're willing to open up our mics for anybody who might raise their hand and say, you know, they've got something that they want to talk about with us. So let me start and give that some thought. Ask us questions, and while you're going through that, I'll read a comment that came in from somebody that tried to help us understand a little bit more why we saw some pretty high levels in data analysis and information sharing. The comment came in that says, I think that info sharing is something that's still developing, particularly collectively between aircraft operators, airports, ANSPs, and GHOs. Help me with that. Ground handling organizations. I should know that. Too much is not yet shared in the interest of commercial confidence or concern that the regulator would intervene. And that is a common comment that we saw in our focus groups and our workshops. Everybody likes to keep some of the information that they've got on that sort of close to the vest. And it is difficult if there isn't those kind of protections. So Greg, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think that the observation's a fair one, but I think also to put a bit of balance into that, we've seen some information and data sharing initiatives that have taken place in certain parts of the world, and these have largely been initiated amongst the operators and in a collaborative approach with regulators. And we've seen some great benefits of that, particularly where these have been designed to look at particular issues and seek resolution. But I did take the point, there are some issues around the world, and look, some of these are cultural, where information sharing is not as perhaps as supported as it could be. And I think that we're looking at some changes to that occurring. But in some parts, in some areas, I think that'll take a long time before we get a true sharing of information amongst all parties. But I am encouraged when I see some parts of the world where some of this data sharing initiative is actually taking place.
All right, while you're maybe thinking about any other questions, we've got a couple of polls in mind that might help us know more about your experiences. Can we ask the poll about what people have been doing, if anything, in terms of their own detailed studies, and what areas of operations that covers? So our poll is, have you ever conducted a directed or specific study within your organization? And if so, what areas of these studies are conducted? So if you're with us still, go ahead and answer that poll, and we'll share that back with everybody. What do we got for a response? Still looking at about half of the group has responded. Now that might mean that some folks haven't been involved with directed studies, so let's just share back the results so far. And Probably not surprising, but flight operations and maintenance are two big areas. And ground handling is the third, but when it comes to other areas and other directed studies, it might be interesting to know what sort of area that covered. And we've been looking for different ways to incorporate things in our toolkits. So if you are so inclined and did answer in the other category, you could use the question tool and maybe just tell us a little bit about what that was about. And at any time, if any of you do want to discuss something in more detail, I think if you raise your hand, we'll open up your mic, and we think we've got time to let people speak.
Mark, can I just jump in there? Somebody else made a comment as well, a very good observation, that the sharing of information openly brings about some concerns in some jurisdictions from a legal perspective. And you're absolutely right, and that's exactly why we formed our legal advisory committee to look at just that issue, so that hopefully we can develop some tools that can assist states and others with perhaps a better managing that. Once again, I don't think that's going to be a short-term solution. That'll take some time, but nevertheless we have some activity underway in that regard.
Yeah, and that's why we mentioned some things about education and training as it applies to many organizations and civil aviation authorities. And you know, some of these places it will mean legislation. So that doesn't come easy. I think we're getting a response from somebody who's been involved in a directed study on CNS and ATM and PBN interaction between flights and ANSPs, or terminal area design. Interesting. We have seen some of those studies. In fact, you know, this wasn't a study, but I was looking at a news article just before we came into today's webinar, and it was showing three-dimensional displays of just how congested the southern portion of the UK is, and that it presents some of the most challenging places to fly in the world. And it was interesting to see a day's worth of operation in 3D for all the traffic that passes around the City of London.
That one there about PBN interaction between flights and ANSPs is an interesting one. I mean, obviously there's been a lot of activity with regard to performance-based navigation in recent years. And I think that that's interesting that a directed study was taking place there. I know that there is some work being done here in the US and also elsewhere looking at certain approaches, and also any complexities that arise from approach design. So there's a fair bit of work being put into that. And the other one you've raised there is terminal area design, obviously a very important aspect, also associated with PBN approaches.
Well, we had a small group that also mentioned that they've done some directed study on maintenance. We do have a polling question that applies to maintenance. Maybe we can find out a little bit more about what areas that directed studies might be done in maintenance. So let's post that. In this case, we were wondering if any of you have had experience in maintenance LOSA, in looking at recurring defects, reliability, or other. And I realize there might be a small group that we're really talking about here, but if you're so inclined and would like to respond to this poll, maybe it gives us a sense of who has done some work in this area. Okay, I think the responses for those that probably were involved are already in, and looks like they're talking about reliability. I don't know if it's necessary to show the actual. Yeah, well, why don't we show that? What's the experience? Kind of evenly split between work that was done on maintenance LOSA findings, and you know that's not common at a lot of airlines or a lot of places in the world. So it's interesting to see that that's being done. Of course, reliability is kind of the backbone of a lot of activity within maintenance. I happen to be a reliability manager myself in a maintenance organization.
It's encouraging to see maintenance LOSA being used and expanded amongst airlines. The uptake of maintenance LOSA is actually very encouraging, and I think most airlines are seeing very positive results with it.
Okay, well, we have tried to use this portion of the webinar to get you know, a little bit better interaction with our participants. Do we have another question here?
No, just a comment.
Okay, Greg says there's a comment that's coming in. I think, let me just cover it. We've been trying to work out our unstable approach rate and unstable approach continued rate. Both of these were difficult because different departments define the issue in different ways. For example, speed brakes not armed or the checklist not complete classified as an unstable approach. By the Flight Safety Foundation guidelines, strictly they are. But do we really want crews throwing away? Do I have the rest of that? Throwing away perfectly flight path stable approaches. So sometimes how you define the question and look at the study can then drive our behaviors on the line. Very interesting.
You know, that's a great observation, and we released our go-around decision-making execution report back in March of this year. And one of the things that looked at that was issues relating to configuration, which relates to this comment here. You know, the good questions raised is what constitutes an unstable approach, and in our report some of that was actually discussed. And is conducting a go-around under certain circumstances in terms of the relevant risk absolutely necessary? But the person that's put the comment up here has absolutely brought up a key issue that we touch on in the report. So thank you for that.
Good stuff. Appreciate that. All right. Well, let me just say we use the interactive portion of this to kind of gather some additional ideas. We're looking to provide more examples and specific topics where we can kind of show, you know, real situations. And so we really thank you for your involvement today. We hope you stick with us as we go through the 4th level next month, and appreciate everything you've offered to us today. Now we're going to work our way through some discussion on this topic. We will take any sort of questions that come in from each of you, so feel free to use that tool on the webinar anytime you would like. And I can see some questions that are coming in. We'll take some time to make sure we're familiar with them. And while we do that, we would like to get a little bit better at understanding from some of you in terms of where some of you may have practiced some of the stuff that we're talking about. So, could you post the first question in terms of detailed studies that folks have done? If you've ever been involved in doing the kinds of directed or specific studies within an organization, could you give us a sense of what area of operations these studies were conducted? And that also might help us a little bit with the experience background of our group. All right, let's share that back with everybody. It looks like we got, this is about half the responses, but in the results there, we've got mostly flight operations, a little bit of maintenance, and maybe some folks that have done some work in another area. And so thanks with that. Good to know that. In the flight ops area, just to dig a little bit deeper, and we're going about this in a way that allows us to manage a little bit more of the webinar in an interactive basis, knowing that it might be really difficult to try to open up everybody's mic and have everybody speak at once. But if you're involved in the flight operations, you know, what sort of area were these studies based on? Were they looking at approach and landing through stabilized approach? Were there other things that were involved in runway safety? Could it have been some other forms of aircraft handling or maneuvering, or was it in another area?
Okay, so that's interesting.
Why don't we share that back with everybody? Kind of an even split between stabilized approaches, runway safety, aircraft handling, and other. Well, with aircraft handling being probably the smallest one there. And before we get into the details on that, do you want to talk about any of that, Greg, or do you, or?
No, I was just going to, I mean, I'd be interested in hearing from people, and you can just type your response if you wish, on what, under the category of other, what are some of the other studies that you might have conducted on what particular subjects, and interestingly, and if there's something you conducted a study on, what were some of your findings? Did you come up with anything that was particularly interesting, or something that you weren't expecting?
So when Greg asks that question, what he means is, in order to make this a little bit interactive, and if you're willing to share a little bit more about your experiences, use the question tool and type in, you know, a little bit of what you're willing to share with us, and that can be sent to us either privately or shared with everybody on the group, and so it's up to you, but we would really be interested in hearing a little bit more about, if you've done some in these areas, what was the study about, what were the objectives, and knowing that, you know, it may take you a little bit of time to type in that response, but go ahead and use the question tool to provide us a little bit of an answer. In the meantime, I'm going to try to answer one of the questions that came in. The question was, how do you recommend a state or an organization go about self-assessing which level of intensity they should commit to start off with? Do you recommend staying at an intensity and completing all necessary topics within that intensity before moving on? Or is it possible to pick and choose, aka a la carte? And so let me try to answer that. First of all, we believe a lot of what we put into the level 1 intensity are basic elements of a safety management system. And we believe the elements that are done at that level are generally done continuously. And they are done no matter what type of risks you come across, no matter how much your organization evolves. They are things that are practiced with dedication and some level of discipline in order to make sure that you're getting the most out of those processes. That's where we talked about, assembling a standardized matrix. That's where we talk about taking an inventory of the data that you've got against the risks that are out there in the world. And those things are expected to be repeated. So we really look at the levels of intensity as some things that might be used on occasion depending on the particular risks that you're trying to solve. So that doesn't mean a la carte. That means practicing level 1 regularly and from time to time getting involved in more of the proactive and predictive elements. And so we think that really makes a more complete and more robust safety management system when you're doing the foundational elements routinely and picking up the other elements where they're necessary. Another question comes in and it says, after the SPA survey, Flight Safety Foundation and Fort Hill Group will have extensive benchmarking data for the airlines. Is there any way for the Flight Safety Foundation member airlines to have access to the benchmarking data results with the names of major airlines? It may not be a good question for the information protection webinar, but I tried my chance, and little smiley faces. So we appreciate the humor. And all I would say is I think our survey form, if you go and take a look at it closely, we ask nothing in terms of identifying information for a particular airline or even a particular organization. So we are kind of practicing a bit of what we preached in building things in this toolkit, and we really don't want that to come back to a particular organization. We think this will be good because you can break it down in a number of different ways and look at it by stakeholder. Looks like Greg and Frank might have something to add on this.
Yeah, just firstly on that, I mean, that's a very good question. The information that's entered is with the data that we've captured is captured on a de-identified basis, so we don't know who the airlines or aircraft operators are that are providing the information, only their general geographic location. But if any airline is willing to specifically share their information with another airline, you could probably let us know and we could broker the contact, but we certainly wouldn't make that public. We would facilitate communication if there was that desire. We wouldn't make it public or breach anything that's submitted or provided in confidence. So just while we're doing that, we're just scrolling through some questions and having a look at some responses there. Mark, did you want to capture any other polling questions before we move on?
No, just if there's anybody on the line that has had some experience in the type of studies that we've been talking about, we wouldn't mind hearing a little bit about what do they see as, what have they had in terms of experience, and what was the objective of the study. And we realize in a webinar like this, we're not going to be able to go through all the details of that. But we're also, in building our webinar, or building our toolkits, we're trying to use the webinars and some of the activities we're doing with stakeholders to get more actual experiences that folks have had and bake them into our toolkits. That, we believe, is really going to help make this both illustrate to a greater degree, but also allow us to explain how these tools are used in those kinds of studies. Go ahead.
The Flight Safety Foundation released its Go-Around Decision Making and Execution report back in March. There's a question that's sort of related, but is very interesting in terms of capturing information by demographic, which I don't think our study actually did. The question here that's been asked is, I've been researching to make risk profiling based on the pilot's demographics. The dependent variable is the choice whether to complete a landing or go around after an unstable approach. The design is mixed method, quantitative, qualitative, because not asking whether a person would go around or complete the landing, instead the open-minded question that would provide a more decisive factors I'll conclude the results. So that's a very interesting study to actually have a look at that in another manner as per demographics. The Go-Around Decision Making Execution report, as I mentioned, doesn't discuss, while it talks about the number of participants in the report and where they were from, it actually didn't look at it specifically from a demographic perspective, but I think that might provide some interesting results. So if you're going to conduct that study, we'd be very interested in knowing what you come up with, what the outcomes might be.
Greg, but the study does break down pilots who have gone around, chosen to go around in a situation, and pilots who've chosen not to go around in a situation, and sort of assesses the difference. They answer the questions differently.
I think we're also being looked at here in terms of geographic demographics as well. So I think that wasn't covered in our report.
Yeah, that report was quite interesting in terms of proactive / predictive. That study was really taking a model in terms of situational awareness and really trying to test the model as it surveyed a number of pilots. And I think that's what you were getting at, Frank, is that we could see, what elements of that situational awareness were there when it comes to management, and what was there when it came to the working line pilots, and discussed many interesting things in terms of what's the awareness level on policy, and how did that relate to folks' behaviors when it comes to what they were doing in their decision making. Okay. We've had some really good questions. People have put some thought into that. I really appreciate that. And it was interesting to see our makeup in today's group, how many people were really focused on flight operations, how many folks were participating from a regulator category. We hope to learn more from a lot of people that have been working with us on some of the work that they've been doing so that we can include them as examples in our GSIP toolkits. Anybody else have any final words for today? Okay. Just want to thank everybody for attending. Appreciate your response, and keep your eyes on our website. This SPI survey has really been interesting because it's been growing pretty rapidly lately, and we hope that continues as more and more people become familiar with it. So once again, have a good day, and thanks for attending. Talk to you next time.